Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I am so happy and grateful to have Dr. Satya here with us today, who is a resilience artist, founder, and teacher, coach, and professional speaker on a mission to help purpose-driven changemakers more powerfully express their magic in the world. This means restoring resilience, optimizing health from inside out, and amplifying creative productivity so that you can create the life you love. Dr. Satya brings a unique perspective of the healing process. Her deeply personal experience with trauma and chronic illness inspired her to innovate treatment strategies and programs that promote sustainable healing and less resilience on outside providers. Or less reliance, I'm sorry. Her multidisciplinary framework for facilitating therapeutic change has been referred to as a unified field theory to provide sustainable, transformative, trauma-informed care across all techniques and modalities. A second-generation chiropractor in a family full of holistic providers, Dr. Satya is actively informed by a passion for neuroscience, biotensig, you have to help. Biotensegrity, well, that's one of those words that rolls right off the tongue, and fascia in a vitalistic philosophy. She's the creator of the fascial flow method, a groundbreaking body-based approach to unwind old trauma and tension patterns and become more resilient to physical, mental, and emotional stress. Above all, Dr. Satya is an innovator, thinker, healer, and champion of human potential. Dr. Satya, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those words that just roll right off the tip of your tongue when you're reading the bio. It's like it gets the icebreaker out the door right from the get-go.
If my name didn't trip you up, I've got some words that will.
Yeah, mine's the same way. You should, growing up and hearing the telemarketers try to pronounce Brizendine, boy, I heard the ones who would give it at least an honest attempt, I would humor, but the ones that would just, you could tell it was just,
Yeah, I always know when teachers were calling roll in school, they would get to my name and I'd know because they'd make this face. They're like, I'm like, yeah, that's me. Unless I wanted to torture them, and then I waited and made them say it. Yeah.
Well, no, this is awesome, and I'm excited to chat with you. And I think that the obvious question to start with, and we'll just start with an easy one, is what is human potential? What is our potential as humans?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And in order to answer that, I'll give you a little framework, which is that I was raised in this family full of holistic healthcare providers that taught me that the body is self-healing, self-regulating, in a philosophy of that there's innate intelligence in the body. And this philosophy can be found in traditional Chinese medicine, it can be found in chiropractic, and in a lot of more indigenous cultures, where we look at the body as a self-healing, self-regulating system that has intelligence. And when I think about human potential, I think about our potential, and it's not even just human. I mean, that it's in all living things, this potential for expression of something unique. Like, you know, if people are religious, you can think about like a piece of God that's in you. And even if you're not religious, it's like still that spark that took you from a fertilized egg to trillions of cells that all know how to do their job without anyone telling them what to do, least of all the doctor. You know, that intelligence that is inside of us directs something magic, some spirit thing that's coming through, like we're not a human having a spirit experience, we're a spirit having a human experience, that our soul, our spark, our magic, our innate intelligence is expressed through this human life. And when we are struggling, we often are told in our culture that there's something wrong, that you're broken. And I don't think that that's true. I often think of it more like you're a light and there's a bunch of dirt piled on top, maybe also rocks, right? And so my job as a doctor, as a healer, as like your Sherpa and helping you through this journey, because I can't do it for you, but is to help you like get the rocks and dirt off so that the light that has always been there can shine more without interference, right? And that's what I think about with human potential, is like in all of time in the past and all in the future. There never has been and never will be exactly you. And whatever intelligence created all the mountains and sunsets and rainforests and flowers and all the things in the universe knew that we needed exactly you. That you have something unique, something magic that you are here to do, that only you can express and be in this world. And that's what I think about as potential, is what is your unique magic, and are you expressing it, or are there things in the way? And how can we get you to a space where you can more fully express who you are in the world?
I think that might be one of my favorite explanations of potential I've ever heard. And I'm utterly fascinated by the concept of, I fully am with you with the concept of the light, but the notion that there is dirt and rocks and this light is buried underneath. I want to take things from, I think that's a beautiful metaphor, and maybe we can break that metaphor down a little bit to what are some of the tangible dirt and rocks so people can understand that. There's those things like, would that be, for instance, would that be a belief system? Would it be a relationship that's not serving you? Would it be a health challenge? What are some of those dirt and rocks that stuffs the light?
That's a great question. And it is pretty expansive to consider what are all the different rocks. What are all the different things that constrict and interfere and distort our expression of who we are. And some of it is going to be physical, some of it's going to be mental, emotional, spiritual. There's all these different dimensions. Sometimes I also will think about a similar metaphor of, like, if you're trying to tread water and you have a backpack and it's full of rocks, that like all the rocks together make it more difficult for you to float, for you to be there. And if you're putting all of your resources into just treading water, you can't swim very far. And so all the rocks together in science terms are called your allostatic load, which means the total sum of all of the physical, chemical, emotional stressors that your system is having to manage. And so that can be anything from all the chocolate and wine you consume to try to handle stress, to sitting at your desk all day with your head forward and mechanical stress on the body because of that, or texting. You know, we even have a diagnostic code for TextNet now, because we're distorting our posture so heavily, it's even changing the shape of our bones. To fighting with your spouse, to feeling like you're in a dead-end job and you just don't love it, and you feel like you don't have a sense of purpose, or that you're not living in your sense of purpose. All of those things equally are adding to what's in the way. And the physical piece, like the emotional stress, most people know about, and like something like not getting enough sleep or not drinking enough water, like we're pretty, like anybody who's started to think about how do I not just survive but thrive in this life has already started to think about like eating healthy, getting sleep. The thing that gets missed, that most people don't pay any attention to, is structural. Is that if our body is holding tension, that will neurologically and structurally distort the innate intelligence being expressed across the body, not least of which is that your nerves can't communicate well if your joints are jammed up and literally putting static on the line between the brain and the body. Or if you have rigid places in your body because you're stressed out all the time, so you hold it, and maybe you don't breathe deeply, and your rib cage is a little sticky, so your lungs don't even breathe fully. It makes me want to take a deep breath. That will neurologically elevate your brain into fight or flight mode, into survival mode, and keep you in survival mode instead of prioritizing growth and expression and thriving. And so that's the biggest missing piece I see for a lot of people is we're holding so much stored tension in the body, it actually perpetuates the stress response in the brain. And you end up in this hiccups like loop.
A few months ago, I gave a talk about how in the United States, I just was speaking on behalf of the United States. I was speaking beyond behalf. I wasn't speaking beyond behalf of the United States. I was in my talk, just made myself sound way more important than I really am there. And was talking about how in this country, stress in many ways is a luxury. We have so many of our basic needs met and exceeded in so many ways. For the most of us, we don't have to worry about where our next meal is coming from, access to running water. We have Wi-Fi to be able to communicate, stay in contact with all these types of things. We have meal delivery services. We have every single comfort afforded to us, where as the majority of the world's population, they exist on, what is it, less than $1 to $2 a day. Like literally our worst day would be their best day. They don't have running water. They aren't even sure if they're going to have housing or anything like that.
Can I just make one tiny interjection?
Please.
We have that in the US also. I just want to say that we do actually have that in America too. And that does not detract from what you're saying. I was like, ooh, accuracy. But yes,
yeah. I'm sorry.
For a lot of people in the US, it is exactly what you're saying, that we do have a lot of privilege that means we don't have to worry about our basic needs as far as food and shelter.
Yeah. And thank you for the correction. Me saying that isn't to say that that doesn't happen in the US. I was using a overly broad generalization there about the US versus maybe the rest of the world. And absolutely, there's definitely some extreme instances of poverty in the US, extreme challenges, people struggling, not knowing those types of things. Maybe I should have clarified it too more by saying the ones that we can hear, the ones that we have these narratives with, who we're able to hear about their stress, we're able to hear about they usually have some of these things taken care of. So in a dynamic like that, where we're not existing in this, we have to worry about going outside and the saber-toothed tiger getting us. Yet we seem to stress so much, which is then is inhibiting that innate intelligence to operate fully inside of us, inhibiting that light to shine as brightly as it could.
That's not actually true.
Okay.
It's not the innate intelligence. Like, that's the thing. Going into survival mode is not wrong. It's adaptive. So the intelligence is directing that process. It's a very smart process. It's just that your brain doesn't realize the difference between sitting at a desk all day and having that mechanical micro strain on the body versus a tiger trying to kill you.
Love that.
And so it's intelligent. It's not wrong. It's adaptive.
And so would it be fair to say then part of that adaptation is we've learned to accept, maybe not accept, but we've learned to
tolerate
or view
and not notice
something on Facebook that stresses us out as an equivalent of the saber-toothed tiger, or on par with that.
Sorry, continue your thought.
Yeah, so I guess that's a long way of what I'm trying to say is so as an outside observer, and going with this theory, if I look at like much of our stress is a luxury in many ways, the things that we see stressed out about and we'll a lot of times have conversations about amongst friends, peer groups, colleagues. And when I look at it as if I'm quantifying it or qualifying it versus a saber-toothed tiger, I say, is that really worth stressing out about? I have the luxury to stress out about it because I don't have to worry about the saber-toothed tiger. And then my question I'm getting at, and so yeah, please pick this apart, is how does that then, if we're doing that, how does that then affect that light, affect that ability to be able to remove some of those rocks, some of that dirt off of the light?
I think there's a couple of layers here, and I'm going to try to sort it out.
Please.
One, we're not necessarily, like, I want to be really, one, I appreciate specificity with words, and that's why I was interjecting earlier, just because we try to take the unimaginable vastness of experience and consolidate it with language and use language to communicate with other people. And it's so interesting how, like, even in different languages, sometimes, like, I'll translate a word from Hindi and it's like a whole paragraph, right? Like, there's some words that don't translate well because different cultures have developed different words to express different concepts. And the thing about language is that we are trying to, like, in order for it to be, for communication to be effective, we have to agree. We have to have the same definition of the same words. And I actually think that most conflict that happens in the world is because we're assigning different meaning to the same words and misunderstanding each other. We often end up talking past each other because we're failing to find the correct language, which is really hard to do even when I'm totally in my center and cognitively, like, at my best. Still, I'm going to assign meaning based on every experience I've ever had, and you're assigning meaning based on every experience you've ever had, and we just hope that they're close enough to be able to communicate. But this is why, you know, it's impossible to get that perfect. And so I try to, I end up sometimes picking apart stuff for as much specificity as possible in service to trying to be really effective with communication and not have misunderstandings. So that's just like one piece. But to speak directly to what you were saying, I think I heard you say that your proposal is that we have the luxury of choosing to assign greater meaning, greater weight to stressors that, in your opinion, perception, are less actually life-threatening than a tiger attack, right? And I'm not sure how much we're choosing that versus that we're being held, like our systems are sustaining a prolonged fight or flight mode in the brain, a mode that is designed just to be there long enough to get us out of harm's way. We're not meant to live in fight or flight. We're meant to live in rest, digest, connect. And the science words are sympathetic and parasympathetic for people that want those. But we're meant to live in that default resting baseline. We're not meant to live in fight or flight mode. And the problems happen when we stay in that mode for weeks, months, years, decades for some people. And one of the normal, intelligent parts of that fight or flight mode, one of the things that changes in the body is our neurological sensitivity to pain, to stressful triggers, that we become, our awareness is heightened and our sensitivity is heightened so that you can be extra responsive to anything that might be dangerous. And so in a really tangible example, when you have a cut, the nerves in that area will be more sensitized to pain. So if you even lightly touch it, it hurts. And that's a protective mechanism to make sure you're, to try to avoid further injury. And so on a more brain-focused example, you become more reactive to anxiety, depression, stress. Like, you're more reactive to triggers. And so you become more like on a hair trigger. And so you're going to perceive stressful triggers bigger. And so part of what might be happening is that our perception of what is stressful is amplified. And so, especially, like you said something earlier about, like, we're kind of softer, right? Like, okay, so we don't have life-threatening stressors, but we have other kinds of stressors. And softer, I think one interpretation of that could be overlapping with this concept of being hypersensitized to stressful signals because the system is living in high alert.
How do we tone that down then? How do we tone down that amplification? And I think first, let me say thank you too for getting so specific with that. You and I were talking quite a bit offline about one of the challenges with language and the generalizations we use, and I catch myself doing it all the time. And there's more times I don't catch myself, and I appreciate you breaking that down because there's some really important distinctions in there that you made that I was not. And I think it gets to a real core point then it is like, so how do we begin to tone that down?
The best way that I know to tone down that reactivity starts with understanding how it got that way in the first place. And I'll try not to be too verbose, but I also know that these are concepts we don't often think about. So I'm all about like context and frame of reference, and like, you know, I was that annoying person in school who was always asking questions that aren't on the exam because I'm trying to understand the frame of reference. But I think that, you know, if you really want to understand something, you do need to have a bit of context. And because I think in a different paradigm than most of our Western culture does about health, we have to have a little bit of that foundation to understand these things, because what I don't want is for anybody to listen to me blindly or anyone else blindly, but rather have the tools that you need and the framework that you need to be able to think for yourself and to come to conclusions for yourself. And so I don't want to just say, oh, well, the solution is this, just go do that. Like, you might come to the same conclusion if you understand my thought process, but it's your life and nobody can live it for you. And no solution, no recommendation is globally the right thing for everyone, whether I'm saying it or someone else. And so that being said, I'm going to give a little bit of frame of reference to be able to answer that question. And that is just to understand that how does the brain come out of fight or flight, like innately? Because the intelligence of the body, like if it's going to elevate a fight or flight response, there has to be an off switch. Like there is a way that the body normally comes out of it on its own and restores that default baseline, because that's really the thing. It isn't about like, you know, a lot of Western medicine wants to say, how do I make that less sensitive, right? And so then we have drugs that can numb the things, or we inject nerve blocks, or right, like to try to feel less. And that's too far down the road. Like that's not central, and that's trying to micromanage the intelligence of the body, which will always find a way to like scream louder until you listen, right? Instead, we need to look and say, okay, well, how would the body do this on its own? And why is that not happening? And what's in the way of the body regulating itself? Because I don't need to force regulation on my body. It can regulate itself. Like the intelligence of the body wants to be at a default resting baseline. And it can be stuck up there because of a constant barrage of stressors. And this is why a lot of stress management approach says you need to decrease the stressors in your life, right? But it's also like if your cup is overflowing, they're basically in this analogy saying pour less in your cup. And I'm like, okay, yes, and how do I build a bigger cup also, right? And so then I'm like, why is the body also, thirdly, not emptying the cup on its own? And that not emptying the cup on its own is what I'm going to speak to here, which is to say, how does the body normally empty its cup? How does it come back down from fight or flight? How does it restore a natural resting baseline? And we can look to something really simple, which is if you smash your finger, like in the door, what's the first thing you want to do other than maybe curse?
I want to grab the finger.
Yeah, grab it, shake it, right?
Yeah.
Because both of those things send signals to the brain that turn down pain, that turn down fight or flight, that help you recover. This
Mm.
is the same science of why exercise fights depression. It's why kids in school that have phys ed programs test higher on their standardized testing than at schools that have removed gym class, because movement is an essential nutrient for the brain. And we have become a culture of stagnation, of sitting. You sit in a desk from age 5 to 65, most people, you know, and even we have more entrepreneurs going and living like the laptop lifestyle and going mobile. You're at a computer all the time, and if you're at a laptop, you have terrible ergonomics about it. Everybody's on a cell phone. I'm seeing degenerative arthritis in teenagers.
Wow.
Because of the stressors we're putting mechanically on our body, and especially neurologically impactful on our spine. The spine is an incredibly delicate interface where all of the nerves, most of the nerves coming and going from the brain, are going through that spinal interface. And you start putting mechanical stressors on the body, like macro trauma, car accidents, sports, whatever, but micro trauma, persistent postural distortion on the body, and it will remodel in response to that stress. It goes, oh, if you're gonna have your head forward, I'll make these muscles tight, you know, and you get tight in here. And the muscles go, I'm tired. And so the fascia, the sticky spiderweb material that everything is suspended in, starts to get more sticky to try and support the muscles and help. And then the bone goes, oh, you're gonna be like this? All right, I'll grow bone spurs. Oh, first I'll jam up the joints, and then a chiropractor's got to adjust them. And then you're going to do this for a while. I'm going to actually make bone spurs. I'm going to grow new bone to support these different mechanical demands. This is intelligent. This is appropriate. But then those bone spurs, the jammed up joints, the muscles, like all parts of that, are starving the brain of the normal movement signals it's meant to get when you go and move around. So you think, oh, exercise is the way out of this. Not necessarily, because if you have put persistent mechanical demands and had any kind of macro trauma injuries at all to the body, now when you go for a run, you're getting some healthy movement signals. You're also getting alarm signals from all those bad places you're wrenching tighter into place. And so you're going to drive up the alarm response in your brain, and any stuck places in the body are going to send alarm signals. Same as a tiger trying to kill you. Your brain doesn't know the difference between those alarm signals and stressing out about your spouse that you keep fighting with or whatever. Like, it doesn't know the difference, versus trying to navigate traffic real fast so you don't get in a car accident, versus a tiger trying to attack you. All of that equally sends alarm signals. So stuck places in your body are perpetuating alarm signals to your brain 24 hours a day, even while you sleep, saying, help, I'm stuck. And the brain is starved of the movement signals. So now every new stressor, every new thing that you come across, the brain has to handle it with one hand tied behind its back. And so restriction in the body, the lack of ability to move fluidly through all the pieces, is perpetuating alarm signaling, keeping our brains in fight or flight mode. And you don't feel it most of the time, because your brain just makes the areas around the stuck things move a little extra, which puts mechanical demand on those places in an awkward way that they don't like, and eventually they'll get stuck too. So the restriction spreads, and we get more rigid over time, and we get more stiff, and we go, oh, I'm just getting older. I'm like, you're 35. That's not a thing. Like, that's not normal. Like, average does not mean normal. And it's extremely common. I mean, 80% of people have degenerative arthritis in their spine by the time they're 50 years old. And it does not start when you're 50, it starts when you're 20, or like I'm seeing in teenagers. So it's that we have to, you want to talk about the solution? We have to get fluid in our bodies again. We have to go and unwind all the years of bound up tension that we're storing and holding, because it's not just about the pain. The pain comes later when it's been there a long time and it's bad. We need to be proactive about making sure that not just can you touch your toes, are you flexible, and do you exercise sometimes, but can you move fluidly throughout the whole body? You know, you should be able to move like seaweed underwater. And if you can't, I guarantee you that is interfering with brain-body signaling, so your brain can't coordinate healthy function in the body, and it's perpetuating alarm mode, which is distorting and keeping you in survival mode and making you more hyperactivated towards depression, anxiety, decreased creative expression, because the brain says it's not important to try and express my purpose in the world when I'm surviving. It reroutes all your priorities neurologically and physiologically at the expense of long-term health, at the expense of expressing your potential, because that's not as important as dealing with a life-threatening situation now, which is what your brain thinks is happening.
There's so much I want to dive into there, and I'm trying to think about which way I can go with the time we have allotted.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Yeah.
Because I know it's a lot. I know it's a whole other way of thinking about all of these things. But central to all of that is something I sort of talked right past, which is that you have the capacity to impact how you experience reality. Our entire experience of reality and interface with reality is mediated across the nervous system. Nerves send signals into the brain to tell the brain what's happening in your internal and external environment. The brain has to figure out what it means and what to do, and then send signals back out over the nerves. So your entire reality is mediated by the nervous system, which you can control or you can influence by working on removing interference to the innate expression of intelligence. And you will be able to show up more fully in the world. One, be less vulnerable to infections and cancer and heart disease and like all the health crises that people think just come out of nowhere, but really we're building under the surface. And you have a lot of vulnerability if the body is juggling and compensating a lot, like an iceberg, that there's a lot happening that we don't perceive. But there's a lot that you can do. One, finding a chiropractor who knows what they're doing, which that's a whole other thing. But chiropractors who are trained in traditional neurologically focused chiropractic can find when there's nerve interference and adjust your spine. And then you can develop a movement practice that helps to unwind those things. And between yourself and a team of providers that are right for you, figure out how to unwind those places, because that's a thing you can do, that you can add to your regimen of self-care that you already know about getting enough sleep and eating real food and working on your goals and thinking about your purpose. But you'll be more able to do that piece when you tend to your physical health in this way. And I think that I see that that's really counter to what we're taught about our health in this society, especially, which is that, you know, you just live your life and sometimes bad health things come out and get you. And I mean, yes, health crises happen. And I know that better than anyone, having had, you know, chronic Lyme and brain injuries and cancer all myself. Like I've had things, but I've been able to move through them with grace by supporting the innate intelligence of the body. And so if you can shift, if you can just start to move into this paradigm of going, oh my God, my body knows how to heal itself. How can I support that? Rather than how can I micromanage my body? And start to go into that rabbit hole. You have a tremendous capacity to influence your health and your life. And the thing is nobody's going to live your life for you. And if you're sitting around and waiting for somebody to fix it, least of all the government, like it's not going to happen. It's other people. Like the person who has your interests best at heart is you. And with all of the chaos that's out in the world, like the thing that also helps your light shine brighter, to brush off some of that dirt is your own your own belief that you can't influence your life. Like when we start to spiral out of control, that feeds us and ramps up that fight or flight mode even higher. And so to recognize that you do have the ability to live your life, and if you don't live your life, who's going to?
I appreciate you expanding on that. And I have so much more I want to ask you, and we only have time for one more question. I knew we should have just blocked out like 3 hours for this and gone. Maybe we can do a part 2 or 3 at some point if you're open to it. We started with the notion of what potential is. And maybe we can close with, when we've played with generalizations and specifics, so maybe I can ask you a slightly broader generalization, not really generalization, but just a broader assessment of, we wake up one day and the world is full of people who have removed the dirt, removed the rocks, and they are flowing like seaweed in water. Potential being expressed. What does that world look like to you?
When I think about the impact of, like I have to step back and first look at what does it mean to have a world where people are stuck in survival mode. And that is, I know that in survival mode, the brain has hyper activated depression, anxiety, aggression, neurologically suppressed ability to understand another person's point of view, neurologically suppressed compassion, because if you have compassion for the tiger, you're not going to fight for your life. Like, it's a survival mechanism. But I think about all of the schoolyard bullying, divorce, war, homicide, suicide, like all the fighting that we have. And I wonder how many of those people are stuck in survival mode, and how different could that look if they weren't? You know, how different could our world look if, because the default mode of expression is connection, is community. And when we're more able to express our unique magic in the world, that works toward those things. And even in a body, like I am a community of trillions of cells that all do their job in coordination with each other. Like all the liver cells get together and do their stuff in concert with the stomach cells, in concert with the, right? And fractally, because our world is fractal, like you step back and a community is an organism, a multicellular organism with all the pieces. And our world is a multicellular organism, like with all these pieces. And so we're more able to function in concert with each other when we're able to communicate, when we're able to connect, when we are able to understand one another. Mm. And then we see, you know, where our, like when I can see how my unique talents and abilities and passions and motivations intersect with the needs of others, and where I can help and we can co-create, we, you know, the potential there is so far beyond what we can even conceive right now. It's pretty remarkable. You know, we've seen this over and over, that when our limitations, when our beliefs of limitation are removed, then we take leaps forward. Like Roger Bannister running a mile faster than anybody ever had. And after he did it, then a lot of people did in the next 6 months, right? And I don't remember the exact numbers, so I'm not going to try and say them. But we see it over and over, that our capacity for expression of our potential is so much greater than we're led to believe. And when we can remove some of the constriction to our fullest expression of light, of who we are in the world, then we can co-create remarkable things.
It's beautiful. Everyone, my goodness, is this one you're going to want to rewatch, re-listen to, and pay extra close attention. There is a wonderful deep dive through the concept of human potential, and beginning with the notion of we are all light. We have light. It's not a matter of going and acquiring it. It's already there. It just may be buried under some rocks and dirt. And what that would look like if we uncovered that and got, sort of dig into it. The notion of, I love that the distinction of the fight or flight with the saber-toothed tiger, and that we can't, it's not effective if we're using compassion for the tiger because it's the innate thing that's in there for, but learning how to look at it from a different perspective of our cups running over. Do we empty the cup out? Do we get a bigger cup? Or do we learn how to manage differently what might be going into that cup? You know, there's these different approaches to it. And one thing I really appreciate about what Dr. Satya shared today is she's not necessarily laying out a one-size-fits-all, hey, you do this, right? Which I think a lot of times we'll hear that as people say, this is the only way. And what she's really saying is that you and you alone are going to be the one that is the responsible one for your life, that nobody's going to have more, no one's going to have a greater vested interest in your health, your well-being, your light shining the brightest than you. And that if you're willing to explore what that would look like for you, to have that light fully expressed, to shine the brightest, that there are these different paths that you could begin to travel down and explore and figure out what works for you. Some of it was laid out today. Some of it would be, maybe we would discuss even more if we had a couple more hours to talk about, which, gosh, there's so much more I want to pick this woman's brain above, because there's just so many fascinating things here. The notion, what a beautiful image that is to imagine the fluidity of seaweed moving in the ocean. That one really struck with me. I'm fortunate enough to live near the ocean, and I go and walk by it regularly. And on my walk the other day, I actually paused and looked and could see some of the kelp to seaweed from overhead down, and I was just watching it move in the ocean, how effortless it was. And when Dr. Satya spoke about that, I felt my own body, and I felt the resistance and the lack of fluidity there. And it made me wonder what's stuck. Where's my resistance? Where is the rock and dirt that I could still work to uncover to allow my light to shine brighter? And to come full circle with the notion of potential, the notion that what a world could be like if we began to express fully that intelligence that's within us, to become a full co-creator, that to not be hindered and bogged down by that stuck stress feeling, but instead to be in a place where you can really start to think about purpose and the expression of purpose. That can't happen, which I love that distinction. I never heard that before, that we cannot focus on purpose when we are consumed by the stuff that has us stuck, the stress, the anxiety. Gosh, that is so freaking profound. And I've never ever heard anyone say it that way before. And that if we do that work, to whether it's removing the dirt, removing the rocks, or it's whether it's the fluidity of the seaweed, whichever one sits with you, because again, it's not saying there's one way or another. It's that to investigate, become your own advocate of your health, and begin to travel down those paths of what's going to be your best life. What does that look like? And to start allowing your light to shine as brightly as it was meant to. Dr. Satya, this has been absolutely incredible. What a blessing this has been. Thank you so very much for sharing. And I really mean it. I do hope we can have more conversations about this, because I feel like we barely even scratched the surface of what we could cover.
I actually, if I can add one more thing that I was just thinking as you were sort of so eloquently summarizing what I was saying. One tiny thing and then one less tiny thing. The tiny thing is that you said we can't work on our purpose when we're stuck in stress. And I want to be clear that it's harder. It's not black and white. It's not an on-off. And you know, there's plenty of us who have such a deeply profound drive in our sense of purpose that we're gonna work on that stuff. It just feels like you're pushing a ship through mud sometimes, right? And so it's not that you can't, it's that it's a lot harder. And if you're using all your like capacity, your resources just to get yourself to the starting line, you won't get as far as if you start more at a default resting baseline. Then all your energy goes into expansion rather than getting you to a place where you can do some work. So there's that little thing. And then the other piece is that, yes, nobody can do your work for you, but the people who thrive the most, who are able to overcome whatever traumas they've experienced, because trauma is universal. It varies only by degree. Everybody has some degree of trauma, physical, chemical, emotional, like all of the above, right? But the people who thrive are the ones who have the tools to be able to move through that, the tools to be able to unpack the deeply held, wound up places in the body where you've put stuff away that you couldn't handle in the moment. And you absolutely can do that faster with a guide, with people who are able to help you navigate that dive inside that sometimes it feels like if you go and open these things up, you're gonna like start crying and never stop. But like the thing is, the only way through is through. And oftentimes we need the support of somebody who's been there, or somebody who kind of knows the goalposts along the way and can help you move through those spaces a lot faster than if you try to do it all on your own. And so it's not that you have to do it on your own. And if you can find, it's like if I want to hike Mount Everest, I'm going to have a lot better chance of a good experience if I take a Sherpa with me, right? And that's often how I think of myself in terms of how I show up for people professionally, for my clients, is I can help you do this a lot faster because I've been through it a lot of times. And so that's something that if somebody, to anybody who's listening, including you, who really want to accelerate the evolution of your consciousness, find the people that you resonate with, that what they say makes sense to you, and who can help you navigate this unwinding and evolving and expanding process more quickly and gracefully.
Love that. Thank you so much for adding that. We will see you next time, everyone, on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye. Oh, where'd my record button go here?
I don't know. It is still